Welcome to another wisdom podcast with Carrie Goetz. She's an amazing, an amazing Amazon best-selling author, CTO, international keynote speaker, freelance writer, and podcast host, as well as being board members at a couple of companies. Today, we're going to talk about her books, what she's written so far, such as Jumpstart Your Career in Data Center, Educator's Reference for Data Center Education, and Poly Packets, All Smiles to the Data Center. This podcast is brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start or scale your podcast, go to podpire.com. Carrie, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thanks. Yeah, I've been in this industry for over 40 years in some shape, form, or fashion. And so this last year has kind of really been a year of giving back and trying to put some tools out to solve our talent shortage because we have about 300,000 open jobs right now. And also just try to get more women and veterans and trades involved in our industry.
Tell me about, yeah, data centers as an industry in the US.
So data centers as an industry is the same in the US and everywhere else. Every digitally known documented thing lives in a data center. This podcast lives in a data center. Everything in our lives lives in a data center. All of our medical information, our financial information, where we transact, who we purchase from, all of that lives in a data center. And so data centers themselves are kind of a living, breathing environment that is an ecosystem that supports all of the computers to make that happen. And the same thing is true for AI and some of the newer technologies that are coming out. All of that lives in a data center.
How did you first get into data centers?
And I'm kind of like everybody else. I fell in. I started out actually in architecture, and then computer aided engineering, computer aided drafting came out. I started writing code for that, and then there was a project to tie a bunch of the colleges together. And since I wasn't afraid of computers, they asked if I would take on the networking portion, which I did. And then just from there, ended up running large data centers, working in data centers, and yeah, it just kind of sort of like everybody else my age. We didn't decide to be in this industry. We just all sort of fell in the industry.
How do you split your times nowadays in between all these activities, CTO stuff, book writing stuff, keynote speeches, and all of that?
I think it's important just to have a really good schedule that you can follow. I live and die by my calendar. I'm probably a little old fashioned in there. I know that you can have, there's new virtual assistants and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it's just the good old fashioned way. I just work by the calendar and keep things up that way. And there's not really an 8 to 5 day. It's work when you start and stop when you stop.
But you is like your core of your day, is it on CTO stuff or it's working for your own self?
It absolutely depends. So I'm a fractional CTO for multiple companies, and depending on what's going on from a workload with them, certainly conference travel, everything. It's just in some ways, I think when you get really busy, your day sort of outlines itself, right? So it's a good split. I do a lot of writing for other companies too, and so it just depends on kind of what's on the table and what's going on for that given week.
So how many fractional clients do you have right now?
6.
So that's pretty good. I'm guessing most of these pay like a couple of thousands per month.
So I'm not going to discuss rates or fees, but all of those certainly keep you definitely busy and keep you engaged without a doubt.
So how do you get in touch with these folks? Is it outreach? Is it they read your book first?
So the book just came along 2 years ago. I've been in this industry for 40 years. So a lot of it is just knowing people word of mouth. One company tells another company tells another company, and then it just sort of works out. We see if we can come together on terms and conditions and what the agreements are. Sometimes it's a matter of somebody coming in and then it ends up just being that gets referred out to somebody else because it's not really in my wheelhouse. But I have a good network of partners that I work with. The majority of them are female-owned enterprises just because we sort of look out for each other. And that's something that we did very strategically during COVID to make sure that we could all keep our companies afloat and keep us going. So we have a very good group of different companies that all support each other in these endeavors.
Right. And female executives or female workers in the data centers, apparently there's not enough of them, but there's still a bunch of jobs open. Why is that that way?
Well, I think at least in this industry, for women in this industry, I don't think that we really reach young girls soon enough with this as a viable career opportunity, right? When young kids are coming up, they don't typically hear about data centers because data center is not an education, right? It's not a curriculum that's designed. So people get into data centers through engineering, through coding, through other avenues, but we don't really have this as a degree specialty. There's only about 5 programs worldwide that cover data centers specifically, despite the fact that everything we do technology wise lives in a data center, right? And so I think that's certainly true for men and women, but a lot more for women. It's just not really in the wheelhouse because there's not a lot of women there as role models to look up to. There's not a lot of women carrying that charge forward. And so we're trying to change that.
What about the fact that data centers are producing a lot of emissions nowadays? Is that something you've looked into?
Oh, sure. Sustainability is one of the best careers you can get into in data centers. I think that we certainly are not where we need to be from a data center perspective with respect to power, but we do have some really incredible opportunities. We can do carbon capture, carbon sequestration for natural gas. I certainly think, as AI is coming along, we're using significantly more power in data centers and we're building more data centers. So the sector is going to continue to use power. The trick is to make sure that we use it efficiently, that we have the right sources of power, and that we, have as little stranded power as possible so that we're using the power that we're actually supplying into our facilities.
In terms of book writing, how do you decide what's your next book and what ideas are worth putting out there?
I think some of that is just a need that you hear about from people making suggestions, right? So the the idea between with the first book, Jumpstart Your Career in Data Centers, was to be able to have something that you could digest in a weekend that would explain the industry, explain some of the jobs. It's written from a career standpoint. So not only does it tell you how a data center works, but it tells you what the jobs are that surround that technology or that piece of the infrastructure and the ecosystem. And so you can take that, and then of course you can grow and go as far as you want. And then the educator's reference came out. I wrote it really to help coding teachers, counselors that are working with scouting for technical merit badges, those kind of things, to be able to bring technology to the classroom. So it's unfortunate that a lot of kids, their first exposure to technology is coding. And coding is a very specific skill set. I used to write code. And if you like writing code, that's great. But if you don't like writing code, then I would hate for you just to quit an entire industry, because there's so much more that has nothing to do with writing code, right? From building the buildings all the way through operations. And a lot of our jobs don't require a 4-year degree. So they're great ways for single moms to go get a certification, get involved. It could be a life-changing event for them to be able to have those career opportunities. Same thing with people returning out of the military. We have a large veteran program. And then certainly, of course, we do a lot with trades. But the idea is to bring, people assume, oh, if it's tech, I've got to have a degree. You've got to be super smart. You've got to be good at math. And those are statements that are completely incorrect for a lot of our jobs. So the idea is really just to get that exposure and help people understand the depth and breadth of the industry. And so when you try to figure out what you're going to write next, what you're going to go, write about next, a lot of that has to do with the shape of the industry and where the industry is going. Right now, AI is a big topic. We understand AI is driving up power. We're going to have a lot more facilities. AI is going to do all these things. We can operate at speeds that we never thought possible. We can process power and compute cycles at speeds we never thought possible. And I think really kind of the sky is the limit. So the trick is really, in writing about things, is figuring out what the next great thing is. And in some cases, the next great thing you can figure out by looking back 10 years and sort of reinventing that technology, because we are a very cyclical industry.
You feel that these 300K jobs will stay open with the advent of AI?
Absolutely. I mean, AI is a tool. It's not a replacement. And I think if we really look at what AI is doing, AI is based on inference. And of course, we have generative AI that can generate things, but you still have to have people that understand and communicate with the AI engines. I think it's going to start a whole new industry just of critical thinking and people being able to challenge what we're learning from the models, right? We still have a garbage in, garbage out problem. Look what happened with Google's AI when they released it. It was, their generative AI did not go well. And so I think, there's going to be more than just 300,000 jobs. There's going to be jobs that are created out there for people to come up with new things that AI can do, just from a medical perspective. If we start applying AI to medical diagnoses and random symptoms, we could come up, I think, with a lot more effective healthcare and take that to areas where people don't have a lot of doctors, they don't have a lot of those type of resources. There's a humanitarian effort that can happen. So anything that opens up from an AI perspective is going to open up another world of possibilities. I don't see this as taking away jobs, maybe taking away some minutia out of jobs, freeing people up for more strategic thinking. But I don't think these jobs are going to disappear because of AI. The boring ones might, right? The robotic ones might, but you still have to have people to program the robots. Nothing in AI understands intent. It doesn't understand will. There's sentience that happens with humans that doesn't happen with AI. And so I think what we're going to see is a whole broad range of careers coming off of AI that are going to open up endless possibilities.
What do you think about my thesis that AI will bring down corporations to like a company being run by 1 to 9 humans and will actually create a full industry in terms of entrepreneurship? No one's going to be employed, but it's going to run their own business and going to have specific contracts because on my end, I've let go of 100 last employees that I had, my businesses, most of which were replaced by AI. Then there's the argument like, oh, AIs aren't creative. I'm sure they're not right now, but I think there will be. And I do think that AI's reasons, not the way humans do, but they do reason um, according to the end result. So what do you think about these things?
They don't particularly reason, right? So what AI does is it's based on generative knowledge. So it's an inference based on what it has from its own language model. So if you take the 100 employees that you laid them off because you hired people to do things that AI can now do. But what if you had taken those 100 people and said, here's AI as a tool, where can you take my company? And I think those are
I
the
did
kind of
that.
strategic conversations that we're going to start seeing, because what we're really replacing is the minutia. We're replacing the repetitive stuff. We're replacing the stuff that can happen over and over and over again and the redundant stuff. And as we start building on AI and capabilities, we start freeing up people to do a lot more things. So think about it this way. If you say, okay, employee number 7, we've decided that AI can do your job. So you need to come to me and say, what are you going to do for this company? What's your next project? Where's your next growth? The big tech companies do that. They allow their people a certain number of hours a day to be innovative and to take on pet projects that may or may not turn into anything, because that's where innovation happens, right? It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens when you pull people together with different backgrounds. I think, the same thing is true when we talk about bringing diversity into the workforce, not because a person's a different color or anything. I view diversity as fingerprints. Everybody has a unique imprint on what they've learned, how they process information, what their future expectations are, what their job expectations are, and how they interface with other people. Those are the things that AI can't do, right? It's gonna do it based on a large language model, just like we do, right? My personality is based on how I was raised, what I learned, where I'm gonna go at the different stages in my life. And we all have those stages. We have a stage where, we're young professionals. We have a stage where we're parents. We have a stage where we do different things. And so I think AI is nothing but an enablement tool to help foster a lot of that foresight and innovation and dreams, really. I mean, if you think about it, so people can do more with less. I think probably one of the biggest areas that AI is going to shake up is education, because we don't have to have a 4-year degree to be able to interface with a computer. We have, we can use AI to tell us how to best interface with a computer. We can use AI to say, here's my little application, find the garbage code, pull out anything that consumes power that's not required for this application, do some of these more strategic kind of things. And I think that we can use AI as an amazing learning model, but I do think that there's going to be some pretty wide ramifications from an educational perspective. You have companies that will pay for your education, but let's think about that from a company perspective. If I send 100 people to college and I'm going to pay for that out of my corporate pocket, I want those classes to be something that I can use in my company, right? If I'm paying for it. Let's look at the amount of electives that people are required to get as part of college. Some cases it's 5, some cases it's 10. Those are classes that companies are paying for that have literally nothing to do with what that company does. So what if we took that money and turned that into a different workforce development? What if we took that and set up a mentoring mentee model, different apprenticeships, different ways for people to learn within our companies? Now our companies morph and it becomes survival of the fittest. It becomes the one that does the best. I mean, it's very much the same with mergers and acquisitions, right? One company gets big enough, it could buy another company up. Now, what happens to the people that started that other company? You'll find most of them go out and start another company, right? That entrepreneurial spirit is strong. So now you can start a company, but you can start a company with AI behind you and with some of these tools behind you to help you be more successful. So something that seemed out of reach and impossible 5 years ago now becomes a very realistic possibility because you have better tools in your tool belt.
Yeah, in agreement with that. AI is going to change the educational system. I think the educational system has been boxing us since day one, and it's quite dangerous to do at scale. Now, I want to ask with poly packets, how did you manage to make data centers interesting to children's?
So I really just I wanted something that was relatable. So the book is about a young girl that is sending a smile to her grandma so her grandma can feel better. Something very relatable, right? And how it gets there, how it gets to the data center. And I think, we kind of do kids a disservice these days because we talk about things going to the cloud, which is some nebulous place that nobody understands, when realistically the cloud is a data center. The cloud lives in a data center. So let's talk about it in terms that we use. If we're going to start normalizing data center careers, we have to start using the term data center. So I just took something that was very, very relatable. Like my grandkids, when they send me a picture, how good it makes me feel, and wrote a story about it and kind of talked about the different pieces and parts along the way.
It's fascinating. What are your top goals this year, Carrie?
My top goals, I'm working on a couple more children's books and working on some addendums to the original career book that takes in some of the new technology like AI and explains some of those things, and what a data center for AI, how different that's going to be from a standard data center that just processes a company's regular information.
Fascinating. And where can people find out more about you online?
You can go to carriegoetz.com. You can look up the books on Amazon, or you can go to my company website, which is strategicom.com.